Hello, welcome to another coffee break with Kardec. Our regular coffee break, where in about 15 minutes we can enjoy a cup of coffee, tea, hot chocolate, cold drink, whatever. And during that time, we also bring some points from the book Genesis to discuss here. And today the topic is Apparitions and Transfigurations. Well, this is a very interesting and very broad subject. At Kardec, we had people studying it, some serious scientists, such as William Crookes and many others, and it was the subject of their study. So in book Genesis, chapter 14, Kardec presents a general, an overview, a very brief one, about these two phenomena that take place. But then throughout the Spiritist books, we will find more about it, especially on the experimental aspect, where Kardec very carefully he studies and he draws conclusions from the different manifestations that occur within the realm of apparitions and transfigurations. The importance of the subjects is for I'll just point out two reasons here. First is the fact that it proves the existence of spirits. It proves the capability of spirits to interact with matter, and also proves the existence of the perispirit, which is the vehicle that makes it possible. And of course, there are many other aspects that are as important as these two, but we'll concentrate on them now. And Kardec was trying actually to put the focus on that, and also warning us all the time to be very careful before taking for granted that an apparition or transfiguration has occurred. So we should always bring to the light of a very important analysis. So he mentions also the reputation of the medium or people reporting the phenomenon. So should be very careful with that. We know that from Kardec's time, and many gave important contributions since his time, even previous from that time, but with the advent of the scientific methodology, so everything started to be studied in a more logical and more, I would say, careful way, following a methodology, and Kardec was one of them. But Kardec was, in this case, presenting a general overview on the topic according to the Spirit. But this topic is very important. It brings so many different aspects that we started to be aware of, especially from the knowledge that was brought by the Spirit. But then the manifestation of it was in different areas. We see, for instance, not only apparition, where the spirit can be seen, and it can be seen at different levels, the result of change in properties of the perispirit, and this change can occur at different levels. We also have cure. Material cure is possible because of the same principle behind, and this principle allows not only spirit turning itself visible to a degree where it can be touched, but also cure, where the fluids are not seen by general people, but they act directly upon the matter, upon the organ, and promote the necessary change in the organic body so that cure will take place. And so it is a vast and subject that should be studied in depth. And either Kardec wrote a book giving more details about these aspects, apparition and transfigurations, and he would take long pages to discuss just the basis on a more general way. but also required a lot of research, a lot of recording of cases, actually, to fully understand that. And even now, with so many books written by so many people who took it seriously and wrote and gathered information from different books and different results from these scientists that have studied it, as I said before, in a very serious way. Even now, these people point out the importance and the depth of the subject. And what is behind all this? Fluids and the perispirit, which is a particular arrangement of these fluids. So we see how important it is. Kardec took, several pages actually discussing the fluids, discussing the perispirit, and then he presents in general terms the cases, particular cases of apparition and transfiguration. So apparitions, they just as transfiguration, we mentioned transfiguration at the end, so we start with apparitions. Apparitions, they may occur at different levels, and I would just point out here that it's a spirit rendering itself visible. To render itself visible, it can be on different levels. We know of spirits because of their difference in level of vibration or evolution or enlightenment. They can't be seen by spirits in the spirit world that are of a lower level. So there is a question of tuning, of vibration, that spirits of a lower level can see spirits of a higher level because their perispirit, the way the fluids are vibrating, we could borrow this word, around the spirit, or the properties of their perispirits are so subtle that even spirits on a lower frequency, or where their perispirit is much denser, they can't perceive the presence of these spirits. But these more evolved ones, they can render themselves visible. They can change properties of their perispirit, and usually is a way of knowing how to manipulate the fluids and also an act of their will. So they can render themselves visible. This could be taken also as a case of apparition, where a spirit can see another spirit of a much higher level because that spirit of a much higher level changed properties and of each perispirit and made itself visible to this other spirit. And it can occur to us as well, because don't forget, we have a physical body, but we are spirits, and we have a perispirit. And those who have the faculty, I would say, more, I don't like the word developed, it's not a case of development, but I would say adequate to be used to see, they may see. So some spirits may render themselves fluidically visible to mediums, to people who can see them. If those spirits, especially the enlightened ones, if they choose to be seen, they can be selective in that sense. They can be seen by some, whereas at the same time not seen by others. So in this case, we are talking about using a psychic faculty to see them, and they rendering themselves visible to those who have the faculty to see them at that particular moment. And they may disappear, if they wish to do so. And this is a process that occurs instantly. So when we can talk about another case that Kardec didn't clearly distinguish, the case of what we call materialization, which gives us the impression that the perispirit becomes material. It's the case where spirits, they can be perceived by material means. Light reflecting and reaching our eyes so everyone could see them. And in this case, they use a special raw material, which is the ectoplasm. It's another very interesting and very broad subject. Many people studying ectoplasm to understand exactly how it works. What we know is that ectoplasm, which is a kind of dense, of course, just like dense matter and subtle matter, we have also this malleable material, almost like a clay, that can be rendered visible and can be used by spirits through the perispirit to become visible and even touchable and leave their impression. There are cases where you can spirits, they render their hands visible through ectoplasm, and then the shape of the hand was left in wax. So they did that. They had wax there prepared, so the hand went into this liquid wax and then solidified, and then we have the shape of the hand, showing that it was a physical process. But was that the perispirit? No, it was a malleable material, the ectoplasm, that was used by the spirit through its perispirit. And also, when you say through the perispirit, because it is the spirit through thought manipulating the perispirit to use this material. It's almost like a paint. We may be completely invisible in the dark. In a pitch dark room, we can't be seen. But perhaps if we paint our body with a special type of ink or something that has its own light, we will be seen, and in the form that we present ourselves. So when we say materialization, which would be a particular case, we could call a particular case of apparition, we are basically saying that the spirits, they can envelop themselves in this substance and become visible. Not that their perispirit turned into dense matter. And they can change that immediately whenever they wish to do so. They can disappear without warning or anything. And they don't have a physical body. It's interesting that Kardec calls them agenerate, someone who hasn't been generated through a natural material process of being born, taking up a physical body. So consequently, they don't die and they don't have a body that will perish when they die. It's just a temporary control of a material substance, as it were, to render themselves visible, touchable. And some people, they may interact with them without realizing. There are some subtle signs that, will tell those who are aware that is not an incarnate person, but is a spirit manipulating a substance that renders themselves visible on a temporary basis, a longer or shorter period in the material world. So these are different cases. So Kardec talks about apparitions in general, giving some, examples of certain cases. And then we get to the case of transfiguration. Well, since the spirits, they can manipulate the fluids. They can manipulate fluids through their perispirit, manipulation of the perispirit. And the perispirit has so many properties. I'll call the attention to some of these properties, which are very interesting and I think responsible for the spirit rendering him or herself visible, and also using that to interact in the material world. Is plasticity. So the perispirit has this plasticity, it's malleable. It's almost like a clay or any malleable substance that we can shape very quickly and make it disappear. Kardec gives the example of water vapor that may be rendered visible or not, depending to the circumstances. And I would use the example of a laser beam. You can see a laser beam unless you have very tiny dust particles in the air, because the particles will then reflect the beam and then will render itself visible. So you switch on a laser source, a pen, for instance, and normally you don't see the full beam unless you have some smoke or you have some dust, some powder in the air, that then make the being visible. We could borrow this example just to give an idea of something that is invisible and all of a sudden turns itself visible. We can see that the being materialized itself, but we used a material substance, for instance, powder, to render itself visible. So when we talk about materialization, we can see that the spirit does a similar thing using this special material, the ectoplasm, to render its perispirit visible. So we talked about plasticity. Also, there is density. The spirit changing the density, it may render itself visible to spirits of a lower frequency. Ponderability. I mean, it can become, ponderable, touchable, ponderable to the point of being able to be measured, weighed, for instance. It can change its luminosity, its visibility. So these are all properties, and there are many more of the perispirits that can be used to explain these phenomena. I do apologize. It is a very broad subject. It's a very, I would say, important subject. And it's hard during a coffee break to go into detail. So I'm just trying to bring a general overview and perhaps excite the curiosity of some of you and invite you to study the book Genesis and also the Medium's book, where there is there it is reported the cases of materialization, cases of apparition, and the Spiritist journal, or the Revue Spirit, where there are many cases also reported. And just to finish, I was talking about apparition and transfiguration. Sorry, the transfiguration is the case where this manipulation is done on the surface. So the perispirit is constantly irradiating. And then I'm talking about now the perispirit of the medium. And the perispirit of the medium and the fluids aggregated around it, I would say the external layer, closer to, now in density, to the physical world, it can be manipulated to give a different perception of the medium's face, and the expression, showing more the expression of the spirit reflected on this transfiguration than the medium, him or herself. We can see that done by spirits who are suffering, and then this suffering, the expression of suffering, will be seen on the face of the medium. Some traces of this spirit, which has in its perispirit also the signs of its last incarnation, or an incarnation that was really important to that spirit. But also good spirits, when they give communication, they also envelop the medium in such a way and also transform this external fluids irradiated by the perispirit to the point that we can see expressions of that enlightened spirit giving communication. So it is the medium all of a sudden irradiates this light, the change in expression and so on, reflecting the state of the spirit, no longer the state of the medium. Of course, this process is a process that involves thoughts. And thoughts, not just by the spirit manipulating it, can affect also all these cases I've mentioned and many more. Thoughts of those present may also affect, from materialization, apparition, transfiguration, all of that. So it is important also that we learn how to keep ourselves in harmony in terms of thoughts, because when this type of phenomenon is produced, it has the interference of thoughts. Well, again, it is a very interesting and broad subject. This is just a free sample, and I hope I've presented you in such a way that you'd be curious now to go to the books and read a bit more. Thank you so much, and hope to see you in our next coffee break with Kardec. Bye bye for now.